That I keep thinking about as we're playing. I don't know about you, but I like to go to art museums. Do you ever go to art museums? No. Okay, have you been to an art museum? Because if you look online at these things, you don't necessarily see what you see if you go to a museum. But if you go to a museum, you'll see paintings by different painters, different kinds of styles, and so forth. But one thing that you see is that there are canvases of widely varying sizes. And why would you suppose that an artist would decide to paint something on a small canvas or a very large canvas? What would be some of the things that would prompt an artist to choose a certain size of canvas, would you say? What kinds of things? Just whatever they happen to have lying around the studio. Do you think it's like that? I don't think so. Do you think that? Rembrandt, just, yeah, well, that's lying around. I'll just, you know. I'm thinking he has an idea. There's something he needs to bring to life. A thought, a scene, a portrait, whatever it is that strikes his fancy. But there are some scenes that you see in, let's say, an art museum. You're walking by, and sometimes you see a very small canvas like this. Very likely, it's not going to be a scene of a huge mountain range with lakes and trees everywhere. Are you going to fit that all into that canvas? It's a feeling a little bit that I have. You maybe haven't chosen the right size canvas for what you're doing, because you're putting everything into a rather smaller canvas. Is that what this music says? That's my question. What kind of music is it? 2-octave scale at the beginning. You know, Bach's cello suites other than the 6th, which is obviously a different piece. It was written for a 5-string cello, as we know. But basically, the highest note we ever get in the Bach suites is G. A fourth, a fifth above middle C. So that's 2 octaves plus a fifth. that is what it is, but it's not the range of the Dvorak concerto or the Schumann concerto, it's like this. That's music written much later on. But within that, you just played a 2-octave scale. And in fact, every single movement starts with that idea. The fourth movement, the saraband, starts with the C major scale. Now you have the 2 octaves again. And then he departs from that. You didn't need to stick with that idea all the way through. The 4 movements have that 2-octave spread. Something about that tells me this is not miniature music. Something tells me this needs a bigger canvas. Would you try painting the opening on a bigger canvas? That's right. By the way, I'm not talking necessarily about amount of sound. That might be part of it. I'm talking about the scope of expression. It's the Bach C major suite. It has a certain space about it. At least to me. But that's the question. What does it mean to you? Let's see. That's true, and in between, are there certain notes we should hear and other notes doesn't matter? Would you think? Are there certain notes in that scale are less important, would you say? Are there certain notes that don't matter? No. So let's hear all of them. That was a different story. Okay, let's do that again and go on. So now we're just talking about the musical intention. What is it that this music means to you? It undoubtedly means different things to different people, and that's fine. All Bach wrote was the scale. There are no dynamic markings, there's no tempo marking. There are no other indications, espressivo, staccato, all of those things. He didn't. Just the notes and the rhythms, that's all. The rest is entirely what you conceive of in your mind. Okay? By the way, one thing you're doing now that you didn't do before is you're playing each string in the way it needs to be played. You know what I mean by that? So if you're playing the D string, it's not the same as the A, and the G isn't either, and the C is something else. Take your strings response difference. It requires small adjustments of different things we do with the bow. That you weren't doing so much the first time. Now you're doing it. And the thing is, it's not because that's what we should do. I think that's what we have to do. Then the question is, what are we looking for? So, if we're looking for then that's probably how we should play it and let it just drop away. If we're looking for one gesture, then we do have to think about, well, how am I going to put the C string and the G string in that gesture? By playing it like the A string still? Probably not, right? So those adjustments have to take place. If you're looking for one idea, because obviously each string has slightly different characteristics. Okay? So let's try that again and then go on. Okay? Some notes are a little bit unclear. You make a string crossing, then I lose the next notes. when you think of what happens after the string crossing, let's try it. And the open D is very good. I would do it too. But then you have to listen to the next note. The D is ringing. We don't want to lose the C. That's good. What about coming from the D? Okay, now you're listening for it. Okay? These are the things we have to do. Keep listening for those things. We're trying to create, in fact, very long lines. In fact, made up of the same rhythm, just scalar passages mostly, but they're very long lines. And in order to create that kind of length, then we have to think about things like this. You've got an open string that's going to ring, could diminish the importance of the next sound, could. But even if we're not thinking in those terms, we should hear. Now you're hearing it. That's the point. Let's go from the low C and then go on into the scale. Yeah, there he recalls the opening scale, right? I would take that as a kind of affirmation, but it doesn't have to be. But I need to be reminded as a listener that that relates to that scale I just heard. And it's not just happening, oh yeah, let's finish it off with the scale. It's more than a scale. It's the scale we heard at the beginning. Let's go from somewhere in the middle of your scale passage, even from the D, on the A scale. You know, we have four things. Yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously, each person might hear it differently, but I would imagine it's a high point. Wouldn't you think? We came from the low C, now we're up there at E, F. That's close to as high as he ever goes. That has its own importance. Sounds a little bit like you're staying here. You need to climb those last couple of steps on the mountain, or the hill. It's just a hill. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you? I mean, I thought so, but what do you think? Are you hearing more of the music? Well, then. Right. That all belongs together. Now we have something new. Okay? So that's important, that we hear that and feel it. That music we haven't heard yet. That's the new idea. Okay? Then we go from the scale and then go on. So, new idea, could that be a new expression? Or could that be maybe a new color? Of course, I'm trying to put the answers in the question. You know, that method. Yeah. But I think it's true. Whatever that is, it's not the same expression. You see, strong open, that's another expression. So I think we need to do what's necessary. All the things we know. We were talking about that earlier, you know, in the Dvorak and also in Bach. But yeah, it's going to involve whatever that is with the bow, all the things we know. But you have to listen for it and aim for that, you know. Let's do the scale again and go on. Yeah, like every note. D string sounds like it's getting a little bit cheated here. Yes. obviously meant to sound like two voices, right? So you have to make sure that there's got to be a way to make that heard. You've got to find a way to make that heard. Different pressure on those notes, different amounts of bow, timing, color, quality of sound. It's true, it's already on the D string. Is that enough? Only your ear can tell you. What I'm hearing is so they all sound equal. I'd like to hear. Can you just play me the lower voice? Just the lower voice. That's what we need to hear. Because that's the most important part of that line. Of course, the upper voice is important. Right? But let's repeat it. We're going to notice it. There you are, Charlie. You're just breathing back up on the fingerboard. See all that rosin you've got there on the fingerboard? So, don't have to be a detective. The evidence is right there, right? Okay. Is there anything wrong with playing on the fingerboard? No. I just don't think that should be your method of producing sound throughout Bach. There's a reason why there's a tendency to creep up on the fingerboard, because it creates a little bit more ease in the sound. There's a little less danger that the sound will crack, maybe producing scratch. It also relieves a little bit of pressure from the left hand. We know these things. Okay. But you still have a little bit of margin to work with, where you're not going to go into the zone where G every second note's a scratch, where every second sound is, it cracks. I think you don't have to hover right at the edge of the fingerboard. You can venture off of it, and that's what I want you to try now. You're getting to D string, G string, la ta ti ta. G string is different playing than D string playing. La la ti ta. Yeah, I want to hear the bass. That's important in Bach. Boom, boom, boom. He's an organist. Yeah. So that means presence, produce sound. Doesn't come automatically. La 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 ti ta. Boom, boom, boom. Last note is important too. Let's go on. On the eighth. What's the next part? Okay, so these things keep applying. Okay, let's skip. If I'll just point to it from here and think, you have a bass line that's going down. Boom, 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 down to C. Got to hear that bass line. You're playing the cello. It's a bass line instrument too. Okay. Where's the hurry? Why hurry? Let's hear those sounds. You can create continuity, you can create fluency, but that's not done especially and only with speed. You're on lower streams, you want to hear the bass line, you rush through it, you're going to lose those things. Okay? In other words, keep listening for those elements. They're there, we need to hear them. Good. And keep concentrating on the bass line. Boom, 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 boom. various reasons. I have heard series of people playing Bach suites. When you hear 30 people play, and after the last person played, you realize you actually haven't heard any bass. And you just heard 30 cellos play Bach suites. That's hard to believe in a way, isn't it? And that's the reason. Because we don't make the bass sound. You know, it's one thing to create ease and fluency, you know, this kind of stuff, but we need sonority. We need to hear that within a fairly restricted range, 2 octaves plus a fifth, he's producing different ranges, including bass, that needs a certain treatment. It's not about volume. It can relate to volume, but I'm just talking about getting things to sound. Okay? Does that make sense? The same stuff is true basically with the Allemand. Could you just play the opening of the Allemand again? Now that, if you didn't realize, which you probably did, but it's that same scale again. In a different form, but it's the same scale that we heard at the beginning of the prelude. So it relates to that in some way. Charlie, I mean, you're a young guy, and I don't know what's going to happen to you when you get older, but you may put on a few pounds. You may put on a little weight. You've seen that happen as people get older sometimes, right? Okay? I don't know how many pounds you'll put on. Let's try 10 or 15. I'm missing that here. It's rustic music. Bum, 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 bum. You know, you need that feeling of substance and weight. So, I'm not going to come around and startle you, hit you in the stomach. But I'm not going to do that. But try to imagine that you just ate a nice meal with lots of whatever you like, you know, and large amounts. Feel it in your belly, okay? And then start. So there's a certain weight to this, okay? Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, it sounds quite precise and crisp, and this is the feeling of the rustic dance. Bum, 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 bum. It's a German dance. Meat and potatoes. So substance on the short notes. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, it sounds staccato and sharp. How about bum, 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 bum? And in a line, yum, bum, bum, bum. Yum, ta-da-dum, bum, bum. I almost don't hear those notes. I hear them, but play them. Yes, sir. You know, we cannot forget, we're playing a mode. That changes everything. All that comes out in terms of what a listener hears has to do with what we play or don't play. And we're playing basically one note at a time, most of the time. That puts a lot of responsibility on every sound we make. That's a bit scary, I will grant you that. But it also means if we don't take care for every sound, then the music is lost, because there's simply nothing else. It's all contained there. Doesn't mean every note has an equal importance or an equal role, but every note has its importance. And we have to pay attention to that. What you're doing now, I heard a lot, okay? So it's really about your intention and listening and hearing whether you're really accomplishing that, okay? Good. Any questions about anything? No? Great. Good. Good luck to you.
You know the word rustic?
Rustic. Rustic is a little bit peasant-like. the country dance. It's not an elegant little minuet, you know? There's something sort of earthy about this. Good point.